Yo, 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 what's up, what's up, what's up? Give up the rack. How are we, my fellow revolutionaries? And if you are joining us from the land of Oz, let me just say to you, I hope you had an enjoyable weekend, and I hope that you are recharged and reinvigorated and ready to serve the interests of capital. And I say capital on purpose, they're not capitalists because, it's a bit tenuous to try and say, you know, in all cases that it's capitalists that are the real problem with society, when assuredly there are good capitalists out there, there are good employers to work for, there are good bosses out there. And so it is capital that we are slave to because capital moves beyond just a capitalistic organization. We work for capital because capital is the basis of this mode of production, and capital is trying to reproduce itself. So, whether you work for a capitalist or not, your existence and participation in the system and its various social relations, on, which are built on very particular interactions, so exchange interactions, means that we all help to reproduce capital one way or another. And as 4AS has said, I would like to pay my respects for workers past, present, and emerging. Yo, 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 what's up, 4AS? Yes, Squeeb89, there is still space in front. Always space for Squeebalicious, Definitious, Make the Boys Go Loco. Love the toupee. If you're referring to my hairstyle today, it is a little bit wild, not gonna lie, but I have literally let my hair down. I'm not tying it up today, Squeeb. Just trying to make that paper bobo. Boo boo. I'm not sure if I'm across that reference, but I will need some. I need someone to enlighten me on that one. Jag, it is nice to see you from Australia. We are living on the other side of the weekend here. Great to see you all here today. Keen to continue the chat. And yes, we are going to continue the chat. Dollar bills, y'all. Yes. Yes. Definitely just trying to live in the capitalist world, man. In the mode of production based on capital. In an exchange society, dollar bills, y'all, are very important. They're very, very important. So yeah, we're going to be continuing our investigation, our long range, um, kind of attempt to draw a correlation between, techno feudalism, surveillance capitalism, capitalism in general, neoliberalism, all of that converging and giving us the perfect storm at the start of the millennia to reproduce a surveillance capitalist stage of the capitalist mode of production. But like the long bow is that, I came across this discussion about the actual origins of the internet and the origins of the internet, while we all knew as part of urban legend that it came out of the military as their communications technology, and like the private sector kind of just picked it up from there. Like, who knows how the private sector really got access to military communications technology? Let's not ask those questions. Let's just, take this kind of mythology that has been given to us since, like the 1990s, basically, that the internet is this new force of the information age that is just going to revolutionize the way that human beings interact, not only with each other and their environment, but like it's gonna change the way that the globe interacts. So humans as a meta race, as a species are going to be able to communicate with one another across the planet, okay, at any point, geographically, at any time they so do wish, thanks to the rise of this incredible communication technology. Again, that has kind of, serendipitously happened around the same point as this rise in the information age and the general digitization of the world. But lo and behold, it wasn't the private sector who just got access to the internet. No, there was obviously a marriage of convenience between the private sector and governmental sectors. And the real story of the origin of the internet is that this was not a communication device primarily. Okay, it serves as a communication device. It is that. But why develop such a sophisticated communication device? Well, one, you need to communicate. And two, you need to be able to process large amounts of data that needs to be instantaneously accessible and recallable in order to facilitate a communication system that is predicated on monitoring large swathes of the population. It was the US military that had interests in setting up an intelligence service. So Intel, thanks to the war that was happening in Vietnam, they were waging a war against a people's liberation force, the Americans. And they were waging a war in a terrain, both literal and figurative, that was outside of the realms of conventional warfare. They were not fighting the Viet Cong, who were, in easily discernible military uniforms and walked around in regiments and used battle tactics that were standard to industrial warfare set by, the World War standards. No, these were guerrilla fighters who were hiding in the jungles amongst populations. The entirety of the Vietnamese society was looking for its liberation, and so anyone was a potential target. And in a situation, you mean the military wasn't all about memes? All about the memes? No, apparently not. It wasn't just like, hey man, I got this funny picture. I really want to send it to Steve in accounting, kind of thing. Let's develop the internet. No, it wasn't like that. It was a sophisticated surveillance apparatus in the face of a intelligence nightmare that was being kind of produced in this kind of post-World War imperialistic warfare fashion that the Americans were undertaking to stop the spread of communism throughout important strategic and regional locations across the planet. They would take it upon themselves to resist liberation movements that were undertaken in the name of communism, let's say, and were being undertaken by entire populations that needed intel on. It wasn't, like I said, it's not just getting intel on a general and there's a certain division within the enemy's military system. Yo, roll call. Here it is. Ollie Atlas in the house. How we doing? Just giving a quick recap of what we learned last week. And so they needed kind of being cognizant of those factors. They developed the internet. Now, the internet primarily was being something serviced on these large supercomputers, and I used the word super loosely in the 1960s context, but they were large conglomerations of punch card systems that are being run by IBM mostly, or designed and given to the military, granted to the military with cooperation from IBM. And they didn't have intuitive interfaces. They weren't able to be used by just anyone. It was really engineers that were compiling and using these systems. And so they, out of a need to be able to communicate more effectively across different departments and not just between engineers and all that sort of stuff, the internet, or this apparatus, Apparently I was on chat mute. You muted yourself? Hey, you rogue. So we don't get censored again today. Yeah. So in order to be able to use these computers effectively and really be able to communicate this intel really, really effectively, government doesn't have the control. You recon, it does. Said a bad word. You bad man. I was just saying, I reckon ApparaNet is gaslighting us. Yeah, it probably is. Yes, 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 it is gaslighting us actually, because I'm really questioning myself every time we get cut off right at the end of a stream now. Questioning my reality, man. It's the ghost of ApparaNet playing tricks on us. But like, yeah, they needed like interfaces that like, you know, anyone in the intelligence service, anyone in the military, anyone in like the Pentagon could use. And so they developed computer technology as we have it today, you know, like the desktop and a mouse and like keypads and all that sort of stuff. They developed that so like people would have an interface to be able to, you know, easily work with this computer system without having to be, yeah, like, you know, an engineer or something like that. And so, like, you know, even the computers that we have today are a result of these early experiments with the internet, which is formerly known as ApparaNet. And, like, they developed all of this technology. And, like, you know, we just, like, magically got our hands on it. I don't know. Like, you know, it seems like there's a little bit of a gap there between like what the military was doing with it and then how this just became a like kind of a public, you know, accessible form of telecommunications infrastructure. It's just really weird, isn't it? That like, you know, something that was being used by the American or the US military and its intel services is just now available to the whole world, like all the public out there. Isn't that interesting? That it's just happened like that, and the private sector has just made it so good and so accessible to everyone. Like you know, they're just really great people. Those corporations that have delivered us the World Wide Web, man. And so like I would put it to you, and like you know, like this guy has definitely, Yasha Levine, who you know has written the book and we've been listening to speak about this whole phenomenon. That like it was meant to monitor people, the internet, and they did that, collected information, they uploaded it, and they stored it on their systems, and they used that as an intel communication software. It's intended to surveil people, and like I would say that it's never lost that function. It's never lost that function. And like you have someone like Shoshana Zuboff, who has like, you know, written like, you know, one of the most important analyses of later stage capitalism that you'll ever get. And she's called this stage of capitalism surveillance capitalism because, like, you know, the digital infrastructure is there to basically surveil the world's populations. But, like, you know, that was what the internet was for in the first place. It was there to surveil the world, like, or to, you know, surveil foreign enemies and, like, foreign countries that the US had interests in. And like in order to, you know, you surveil them, you don't just watch them, you interfere, right? And so they were putting down political organization in foreign countries using this infinite internet infrastructure, and then they took that home and applied it to American citizens as well. You know, in places where like students were protesting against the Vietnam War, they were like, you know, uploading information about like citizens to the internet and surveilling them using this complicated, you know, kind of web communication infrastructure. And so like somewhere between then and like, you know, the late 90s, let's say, that went public. Okay, Shoshana, baby, please. You know, somewhere along the line that went public, and it's just like, did the private sector just get access to it? You know, like, lo and behold, someone leaked the internet out of the Pentagon and it just went rogue. And now we all get access to it. Like, like the genie has is out of the bottle kind of thing. Pandora's box has been opened and like no one can claw it back in. We're all done for. We're all just going to live with this omnipresent internet that exists out there, and no one can really control it or shut it down. But like, maybe it was let out of the bag. Maybe it was done on purpose because that's what this is. It is surveillance technology. And like, cut it loose on society and let them do its own thing. Andrew, hello Andrew. I'm not sure I've seen you on the chat before or in a stream. The internet is a network of networks. The French had their own, as did the UK and Norway. And the internet became very free, allowing the spread of information, even info they don't like. Hi, mate. How you going? Welcome. That's why it's censored. Yeah, that's why we're censored. Oh. Yes, so I will leave it there on that little cliffhanger because that's pretty much where we were at with this thing. Like, with this discussion. I've seen you on TikTok. Oh, no way. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That's great. Well, I'm glad somehow that some of the stream clips that I put up on TikTok are actually getting it across to people. Welcome to this is where the magic actually happens. This is where it actually. No, we're just starting actually. Yeah, breaking through the algo. It's happening, man. And then we're going to set up a network state, Jag, and it's going to be called MysterE Stan. And then like we will not have to live at the behest of somebody else's algorithm. We will create our own decentralized network algorithm based on blockchain technology, and we will all vote. And we will use that blockchain technology to start crowdfunding something and get diplomacy or whatever the formula is for the network state. I'm going to be chief of jesters. No, you're going to be in charge of Intel, actually, and surveilling the world's population, all of us. Well, I was searching for the Dark Enlightenment, etc. Interesting. Yeah, well, we have talked about the Dark Enlightenment here a little bit. And Nick Land and the accelerationist movement, and our friends, the tech bros, with their libertarian fantasies of world domination, are quite the accelerationists, quite the believers in the Dark Enlightenment, bringing back the monarchy, Bring back the monarchy. And, the masses should just learn to live, in their place, really, with the leftovers of the scraps of the table of the higher sections of the bourgeoisie. We'll build our own theme park with blackjack and hookers. I work in tech. Some people are extremists on libertarianism. Isn't it funny, though? Like, because, like, libertarianism, like, by its name, like it should, like the most extreme form of being liberal should just be like completely being free from domination and hierarchy and all that sort of stuff. But the great irony being that libertarians are all for hierarchy and dominating each other and stuff like that, as long as they can profit from it. So definitely the ideology of the modern bourgeois. I actually find the decentralized web movement even more interesting after learning about, look, the possibilities of decentralized web, like Web3 and all that, like based on blockchain, where like you get your data back, like you get data sovereignty, and like you can control your own digital wallet and stuff like that, where you don't have to use a state-backed currency, and you don't even need a bank. Like what a liberation, like what a liberal world that is. But being done on the backs, or a society completely controlled by some techno feudalist, like I don't see that like being any less like controlled, unless these were proper democratic network state communities. But like what would you say, the condition or one of the provisions of the network state is like each state will be kind of set up by a founding member, and like people will choose to follow that founder or not. So it's basically like some billionaire sets up a community, and then like if they slightly align with your values, you can go join that billionaire, but they have basically say over everything. I think it might make even make it even more controllable potentially. Yeah, if like, yeah, because like the infrastructure of the network state is built around the blockchain technology, but like who designs and controls this blockchain technology and stuff like that? Like there's like one group of technocrats and a billionaire or multi-billion billionaire who kind of funds the whole operation and controls it all, and they can just like flick you off like when they want to. um It's that or femboys. That's how they see it. It's that or femboys. Those are the two options. We go libertarian fantasy or we get femboys. That's how they see it, but we always end up with some type of system afterwards. Yeah, like one of the best comments that we saw on like the network state, like propaganda that we were watching was just someone was like, isn't it funny how like libertarians, when they try and create a new society, they just end up creating like government again. Like, I don't think that's pretty much it. Democratic city state. You hated the government so much, you build your own government. There it is. That's exactly the libertarian paradox. And we're a few dozen away from 2K. What do you mean by a few dozen away from 2K? You're talking about the subscriber count. You're right. We're almost there. I help my old Greek neighbor with computer stuff, and he gives me lemons. That's my crypto. What an exchange society that is, hey? Take it back to the good old days. Hey? The usual credit system between humans. Yeah, I can do something for you, but like, when I need something, I might call you in for a favor. The original human credit system. Lemons for tech help. Libertarianism in the modern sense is just a less extreme form of anarchism. Yeah, it's very like performatively anarchistic. Like it pretends to love all of those types of ideals. But like, while centralizing it in the hands of some billionaires, basically. See, decentralized city state there. Lemons will be the currency. Yeah, apparently. But yes. Yes. We are going to continue and answer that, like, that real question today. I'll look for the answer to that question, like, why did the cat, like, was the cat let out of the bag? Like, kind of thing. Why did the internet actually come about? Like, in the public world. What happened? How did we get access to it? Us plebs, like, kind of thing. If, like, what Andrew is saying, like, the Americans had one, the French had one, the UK had one, they all had these complicated network systems, they all had their own ApparaNet. How did we all get the World Wide Web? And, like, I'm going to put it to you that this was a continuation of this idea of surveillance. Like, give other people access to this communicative tool, this expansive and complicated communicative software, and like they'll start doing stuff on there, like living their lives on there eventually, and you'll be able to sit back and monitor the whole show. And then you get to decide what you do with that incredible power that comes off shifting society in that fashion. No, it wasn't ApparaNet. It was the American Network L. Okay, I haven't come across that. But yes, we're going to get to the bottom of that today, I hope. You seem to be quite the historian on this stuff, Andrew. So, like, as we are watching this, if you call bullshit on any of the things that you're hearing from our military historian, Yasha Levine, please let us know. But we're going to take it over to there so we can finish off this story, because I know Squeeb89 is chomping at the bit, because we started speaking a little bit about how to avoid being tracked and surveilled on the internet. And like with people have brought up the idea of Tor and the dark web and all that sort of stuff. So the French and UK scientists and commercial networks were built more for building a network of networks. I've got a great video on. Okay, like a video that you've done. Interesting. I'm held still. Good. I'm glad. I hope you didn't hold your breath for the entire weekend, and you took some breaths where you could. So let us continue, and let's get some more truth bombs going. Hey, know what I've seen. Okay. Well, look. I guess now's a good time. Why not? We have a Discord server, Andrew, and so like we drop a lot of propaganda on there. So like I'm just gonna put that there, and that'll be our little secret. I'm just gonna put an invite to the Discord. Red pill me on this. I will can red pill you on this. That's not right. Why can't I just copy the Discord stuff? Couldn't do it last week either. Jesus Christ. But if you tell anyone, I will come to your house. Oh, there it is. Fuck yeah, it worked. All right, Andrew, there's the Discord. If you have an interesting video on this history of the internet stuff that you want us to see, come and join our Discord server and drop some propaganda. It'll be good. It'll be good. We like to share propaganda over there. All right, let's do this.
Use the punch card. Use them completely. Yeah.
Yeah, they use the punch card tabulators to essentially find Jews and to more effectively.
Okay, so like where we were at with the discussion last week was like he's talking about like IBM and like how IBM was instrumental in like the creation of like these computers and stuff like that were like used by the military and like to develop ApparaNet and stuff. But they were also IBM were like contracting out. I think through subsidiaries or like other companies, but it was essentially IBM that were like providing all the infrastructure that the Nazis were using for their own like data like collections and computing services and stuff like that. But like they were really documenting a lot of the stuff that went down with like the Holocaust. So they were documenting all the like the Jews and like the Romani like that they were rounding up and stuff like that. So they had like records of basically their entire trail of destruction. Former IBMer here. I'll talk in the Discord. We go try later. Add it later. And your video will get blacklisted talking about protected peoples. Oh yeah, shit. I forgot about that. Well, look. I didn't say anything too crazy. I didn't say the I word. So like no one cares about like Jews generally. It's just the Israelis that you can't speak about. They're protected. Glitched a second time in one stream this shortly. Like, are you getting blocked, Ollie Atlas? What are you writing, man? Hey, you're in trouble.
Exterminate them. But also IBM is intertwined with the Social Security Administration. IBM essentially ran the Social Security program, right? So the welfare program, not the welfare, but the pension program of America, it was all done on IBM computers. And so really IBM was like a privatized extension of the kind of almost like the New Deal post World War, New Deal in a post World War II American state, and so that I think the utopian rebranding I think depended on people being ignorant of actually what underlies the internet, what underlies this personal computer revolution, and what underlies it is American capitalism, right? So
I want to talk about, before we get into Tor, I definitely want to, because you write a lot about Tor. And I want to get into the fact that these tech billionaires now have.
Can we just like take a moment to realize like how he expressed that was like, while IBM is kind of, it's a company, it's a corporation, it's really just a privatized extension of the government. Like how much stuff does it get Like, how much work does it get? How much of a name for itself has it made? How much of its billions, how much of its infrastructure has come from, like, government contracts and like subsidies and, like, probably things that have been developed through government funded research and development programs through universities and stuff like that, just being given to IBM. It's just like, well, fuck, we need your help with this, or like something like that, or we're going to contract out to you. Here, you have access to this technology and that technology and stuff like that. So, like, there's this like massive myth in, like, especially the neoliberal era, that, like, private companies and private interests, the state is completely antithetical to private interests and private efficiency and corporations and stuff like that. Like, they can exist by themselves. The government is a hindrance, actually. But, like, you can see with these types of stories, like, they go hand in hand with one another. Like, you couldn't have a organization of IBM significance if it wasn't for the state. If it wasn't for the American government, the American military, the idea of social security, pension systems and stuff like that. If you didn't have, like, the Nazis, like, like all of these kind of state infrastructure requirements being serviced by private enterprise. The Social Security was added in 1936, question mark. They started in the census, IBM and Michael Douglas. Well, you are quite the IBM historian here. Earlier, your screen turned blue and purple and blurry. But it happened. Oh, my screen. Yeah, it might be my connection. Sometimes my connection drops out. So I do apologize. I've actually been having problems with my internet recently. I wonder if someone's watching me. It's only happened in the last like couple of weeks too. Put man on the moon, basically. Sorry, voice text failed. But yes, I just wanted to point that, and that fact that usually goes awry on libertarian types and, like, general apologists for capitalism, is like, you can't have these massive private, like, organizations really without the state. Like, the private sector doesn't exist without the state. Markets don't exist without the state. Like, those things, they feed off each other.
Are essentially running rampant within the Trump administration.
Yeah.
But just talk a little bit about what you call the censorship arms race. This is in the early 2000s, because I thought that was a really important point.
Well, look, yeah, because while on the one hand, the internet was being sold to American but also global consumers as this technology of utopianism and democracy, America saw the internet as a tool of American foreign policy and American power abroad. Because America developed this technology, and as it was sort of going outside of America and globalizing and being picked up in Europe, in Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and in China as well.
A natural marine source of omega-3 is a great way to boost your diet. But if you don't like the aftertaste...
Anyone? Fish oil. Krill oil? Anyone? Hey? Don't let me stop you.
American Union and in China as well. America, the State Department and the CIA saw the internet as like a crowbar or something, that could essentially, if you could beam propaganda, you could use the internet to reach foreign populations in a way that you couldn't before. And so there, with China specifically, there began to be a conflict very, 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 very early on in the 2000s about who gets to control your domestic internet space. And so China very quickly understood that the internet is a threat, that the internet is a tool of American power, and that if it didn't control its domestic internet space, it left itself open to foreign influence from America and to a kind of various destabilization programs, to propaganda and things like that. And so China began to...
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because, like, when I was growing up and stuff like that, like, the idea that like the Chinese didn't have access to like Google or I don't know, Facebook or something like that, and like they had their own closed like internet system, was like, you know, used as this tool of like, you know, Western propaganda just to show how illiberal like Chinese society was. Like, you know, they live in a communist dictatorship, like it's all cultural suppression there, like everyone lives in like abject poverty, and like, you know, it's all death, decay and destruction under like some new form of like gulag style living. And like, you know, they don't even have the internet kind of thing. And like they had the internet, they have a controlled version of the internet because like the Chinese state, the Communist Party understands the power of American foreign influence, and American like, you know, tendency to like destabilization efforts to anyone else out there that might be an emerging power or might just be a threat in any way possible. And so you just like destabilize their country politically so they can never amount to anything, and like, you know, take over your economic hegemony or your militaristic hegemony and all that sort of stuff. And so like the Chinese, like, you know, very early on were just like, let's put an end to this. And they like cut the Americans kind of out and made sure they carved out the own like kind of terms of their own like internet service. And like this stuff isn't like, you know, like isn't complete fantasy or like too hard to believe, like that this type of war would have gone on between like these two like states. Like the Americans would have been pushing into China to a certain extent in the early days of like the internet's proliferation, and the Chinese would have shut that one down real fast because they would have known the potentiality for Western or American propaganda. And like when we looked at the way that USAID was being used as like a pawn in kind of like spreading American soft interests, let's say. So like not only like, you know, providing aid to people, but also like interfering in other countries, like political stability and all that sort of stuff, and spreading propaganda. Like we looked at how like I think Congress approved like what was it, like $1.2 billion in like, you know, 10 years ago in like, you know, funding through USAID to like, you know, spread anti-China propaganda and stuff like that. So like this is not like, it's probably would have definitely gone down that the Chinese would have just been like blocking the Americans out, because America uses the internet and like spends, you know, enormous amounts of money as a state machine on spreading propaganda about like other countries and destabilizing other countries and stuff like that. And like that's what the internet has amounted to when it comes to like at a national level or a state level. You know, do we protect our internet? Do we keep it away from foreign powers, or do we let them come in and spread their propaganda here? And like the Chinese would have been like, you know, straight off the bat, nah, we're not letting that happen. Whereas you have like someone like the Russians and stuff like that, and like, you know, Eastern European countries, they don't care allowing, you know, people to have access to the internet, and because like that means that they can use it as a weapon and a tool to spread their own propaganda. And like, you know, you hear about that sort of stuff happening all the time. You know, with like, you know, Russian influence on like, you know, things like in different countries and like, you know, especially in America and stuff like that. So like it's a bit of a two-way street, but the Chinese would have definitely cut the Americans off straight away. No, we're not having you influence our population. No, thank you. No, sorry. But I'd argue against it being a US tool, to be honest. This is especially funny considering the Red Note stuff that happened, where the Chinese teens were like, ooh, everything is true, what we were told about America. And the American teens were like, ooh, everything we know about China is a lie. The internet was a very different place around 2000. Anyone remember setting up your own website? No, I don't really. No. I remember modems and like the noises they used to make back in the day when you had to dial up. Hey, it's a long time ago.
To essentially control what gets past its national firewall, right? And to begin to erect this kind of defense against American unfiltered American internet content. That was primarily a lot of these programs that were targeting the Chinese population were funded by the CIA or spin-offs from the CIA, like Radio Free Asia and things like that. And so
what is Radio Free Asia? I've actually heard people talk about that before. Podbean. Radio Free Asia is a news service that publishes online news, information, commentary, and broadcast radio programs for its audiences in Asia. The service, which provides editorially independent reporting, has the stated mission of providing accurate and uncensored reporting to countries in Asia that have poor media environments and limited protection for free speech and press freedom. Interesting. So like propaganda tool for countries that don't have enough money or free speech rights. This is the English version. Find us, about us. Okay, so doesn't really give you much, though, does it? They put on Tiananmen Square massacre in there, though, hey? That just shows you where they sit. Interesting. So I wonder if this is part of the propaganda machine, eh? The global propaganda tool. They can spread dissent in other countries, dissenting voices, the counterculture, let's call it. It's the equivalent of Radio Free Europe. Yeah, and there's Radio Free, Europe, and there's Radio Free other continents as well. But like, are these part of the... It's now defunded. Yeah, I wonder when they defunded it, if it was very recently. MySpace was my free website. Radio Free Asia sounds like Mbridge related projects. Mbridge. No, but I think this is what I'm saying for us. I think this is like a Western propaganda thing. Like they fund, media in countries where media is restricted for other reasons. We didn't really have international free radio here in Oz. Not for my generation. It's defunded by Trump. Oh, so like through the USAID stuff, I wonder. Or is this originally international waters style? Well, shouldn't be surprised. All right, fair enough. Interesting.
What that launched was America could not accept that, right? It could not accept that another country would say, look, we want to control what happens within our borders, right? We don't think that allowing CIA propaganda to just sort of to target our population is good for us or is good for China. So we're gonna have a kind of a censorship regime against the outside. And so America could not abide that. To America, that was essentially like someone closing its markets to American corporations, right?
What? How
China,
dare they?
would not allow Google or other American companies to operate freely in China. And so the U.S. began funding these kind of anti-censorship technologies. In the first iteration, the organization that was making these anti-censorship technologies, essentially tools that you could use that people in China could download to kind of go around the firewall, right? Initially, the main organization that was involved in that was Falun Gong, which is this pretty crazy right-wing cult that's backed by the CIA that puts on all these sort of Chinese anti-communist ballets that you see posters for all over cities in America. And this cult was creating these programs, but very quickly it moved to a different organization, and that organization was the Tor Project. That became kind of the major anti-censorship.
Whoa. Million miles an hour. Did you hear that, Squeeb? Did you hear what he said? That they were like, they're trying to figure out anti-censorship programs or ways for like people in China to get around their own firewalls and stuff like that. And like Tor was developed as one of those. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Right. What did I miss in the chat? Kind of funny how North Korea plays free radio over the border on loudspeakers. I get you, MysterE. You could say that the internet has just followed the same patterns as other things the state has attempted to make more legible. Yeah. Yeah, I know. It seems like it, right? It's just like, unleashing this system. FBI Director James Comey have publicly lobbied for the insertion of cryptographic backdoors in software and hardware to allow. Interesting. Countries like China, Russia, America, NK, etc., may censor for authoritarian reasons and not safety reasons. It's what they have in common. It's literally open about it. Whoa.
Tool that America was promoting,
Let me just go
creating all over cities in America. And this cult was creating these programs. But very quickly, it moved to a different organization. And that organization was the Tor Project. That became kind of the major anti-censorship tool that America was promoting in China, but also in other countries like in Iran and then later in Russia.
Okay, explain what Tor is. It became the lodestar for WikiLeaks
Yes.
and for, I don't know, do you call them crypto anarchists? These people who felt that they could evade surveillance through the dark web. I told you before the show, on Tor when I was communicating after the Snowden documents, which were housed in Berlin. There was communication between myself and them, but they always insisted on doing it through Tor. Explain what Tor is. Explain what the dark web is.
Yeah.
But as you also explain in the book, unless you are completely severed from Gmail and everything else, Tor, which I think by the you make a very convincing case, was always a fiction in terms of what it actually was. But you also can't. Tor becomes useless unless you completely sever yourself from all other normal internet activity. But just explain all that for people who don't understand what it is and how it works.
I'll talk about what the Tor sort of says it's going to do, and then I'll talk about the history, because I think it's very surprising about where the origins of Tor, actually who created it and why it was created. So what Tor promises to do, you download, now it's like a special browser. It's essentially a kind of a different custom version of the Chrome browser, right? And that Chrome browser has a special program in it that what it does is it kind of does the what do you call it, like the 3-card Monty, it's the where you con men on the street will try to like play with you, and you got to find where the little ball is underneath one of these cards. And so that's what Tor claims it can do with your internet traffic. It obscures, it shuffles it around, right? Because all right, well, if you just to the internet is fully transparent in the sense that when I go to, let's say, NewYorkTimes.com, right? I type into my browser, NewYorkTimes.com. That tells my internet service provider, hey, please request information from NewYorkTimes.com, the servers that have that information. So my internet provider knows where I'm going, what site I'm going to, what I'm requesting, right? And so whoever's ever watching my internet service provider, let's say it's the NSA or the CIA or the FBI or all three of them, know that, hey, this guy is requesting information from NewYorkTimes.com, all right, or WikiLeaks.org, right? And so it's transparent to anyone who's watching and to the company that provides the internet service. On the other end, right, my request is also transparent to the other internet service provider who is providing this information, right, that hosts New York Times servers or WikiLeaks servers, right? So New York Times knows, hey, there's a person from this IP address. They're requesting this particular web page. Send it to them, right? So my internet activity is transparent to anyone who has access to data on the internet that the internet service provider has access to. And so what Tor claims it can do, and it does do it, is to obscure kind of the origin and the destination of your internet requests, right? So what you request everything through Tor. So you request it through Tor, and then Tor does this kind of shuffle with your traffic that no one really knows who you are, and so it's sort of obfuscates your identity. And
well,
it
you
does
talk
do
about
so.
how it became a big a tool for drug dealers.
Yeah, and then there's another thing. Tor actually began to, you could host websites in like the Tor cloud, essentially, which was the dark web. So you don't actually ever leave Tor. So Tor is its own internal network, essentially, and you never leave it, right? So if you request, let's say, NewYorkTimes.com, it has to leave this Tor cloud because it has to go to the public internet, right? But your identity, your entry point and your exit point are essentially broken up. They're no longer connected. That's what Tor does. Or you could stay inside that and host a website inside that, and that was the dark web, and it became very useful for pretty famous, the Silk Road, which is this big drug marketplace. The guy was caught, eventually, even though he used all these technologies. And he actually, Trump just pardoned him and released him from prison. He was serving 2 concurrent life sentences in
Why? I wonder why Trump pardoned him. The Silk Road guy. That's interesting, isn't it?
prison. Anyway, so that's what it claims to do, and it does do it on a technical, textbook case. Yes, it does do it. The problem is that if you are using, and if you're using Tor to hide some kind of petty crime, let's say, or you're hiding from the local police or something like that, yes, it works. But if you're using this technology to hide from the FBI or the NSA, it starts to fall apart. And it was targeted that it could do that. That it could provide protection from the most powerful intelligence agencies on the planet. That's sort of its stated. Tor itself, did that, and the people who promoted Tor and backed it claimed that it could do that. The problem breaks because if you are someone like the NSA, you are observing vast amounts. You're basically observing the entire internet in real time. And the problem with Tor is that you could actually time things. So if you're using Tor, it could time things. Like the amount of time it takes to jump through Tor is actually predictable. So you could say, "Oh, this guy's entering here, now here," and then someone's coming out the other end, a few milliseconds later. Well, we can correlate those together. So that was one way you could track people. Another way you could track people is that
So you can be tracked on Tor. Like there's systems and there's ways. Like that was never how I understood how Tor or the dark web worked. Like I thought that was just like completely fail safe as long as you were disconnected from everything else. Not everybody cares about censorship for regular activities, but instead only stand up for what? For when they are doing perceived wrongs. Yeah. If you're not doing anything wrong, why do you have anything to hide? Tony Abbott also likes some raw onions. Tor mixes all incoming and outgoing traffic in a big pot, so it's hard to know which comp was talking to which computer. That's not quite true. Only the DNS request is easily tracked. Lemmy-wings stuff WikiLeaks. But if you log in to a form, you just bypass the whole concept. But sending a secret message in my name is asterisked out. So there are some papers around tracking people outside of traffic origin destination, but instead the types of things occurring. See, like all of this conversation is well above my head. I don't know what you tech bros are talking about here. Also worth knowing, you can tell if someone is using Tor, just not what they are doing. So it can be like a spotlight. So that maybe that's what he's also talking about here. You can tell when people are going in and stuff. To then put other types of surveillance on. Yes, I saw that paper. Ross Ulbricht, you talked about him before. All these people caught. That's the guy, Ross. Ah. All these people were caught mostly on Tor, just failed OPSEC. That was one of his campaign promises. But why? Why? What's so important about releasing him? Like a lot of things, don't overuse it too. Long messages. Uses allow more data for offensive checks. You want short uses. Not really easily. It's hard to do with the statistical type of attack, so limit your time and reduce your risk. Most people who've been caught ask dumb questions on Stack Overflow with their name on their email address. Look at you guys nerding out in the comments section, eh? Hey? The IT guys.
every computer in
Libertarians worship that guy. Lock in the votes. Ah, so it's just like a cult of personality kind of thing. So it's just like, yeah, liberate him, pardon him kind of thing. That'll get the people going. The libertarians worship him. Fair enough.
And every browser has its own unique signature, which can also be tracked. And then there's just bugs in the code that are not known to people that the NSA has discovered and that has kept to itself, essentially allowing it to unmask people that way. There are all sorts of different ways to circumvent this. But there's even a darker level to it, which I think makes it a lot more interesting. Tor itself, while it billed itself as this independent agency.
Hi, I'm Grange Chung, your Liberal candidate to read. I was born and raised in Sydney.
Right on the cliffhanger moment. Tell us, man.
To it, which I think makes it a lot more interesting. Tor itself, while it billed itself as this independent agency that was run by these anarcho kind of crypto guys who hated the government, who had long hair, who seemed to be against the NSA, who were helping WikiLeaks and all this stuff.
We were talking about Jacob Applebaum.
Jacob Applebaum and Roger Dingledine, who was also the head of Tor project back then. I don't think he's the head of it anymore. These guys were on the payroll of the U.S. government, and specifically nonprofits that were linked to the State Department and a CIA spinoffs like the Broadcasting Board of Governors. It's called a different name now. It's called the U.S. Agency for Global Media. I mean, they pick these names, man, that like you can't remember them. They're just gray, generic names, and they keep changing them. But the Broadcasting Board of Governors back then was the umbrella agency that ran America's government propaganda news divisions. Everything from Radio Free Europe to Radio Free Asia, and all these different language programs that were targeting the Middle East, that were targeting South America, that were targeting China, Vietnam, Korea, Russia, Iran, blah, 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 blah. So just the entire American propaganda division that was sort of the agency that was overseeing it was also funding this supposedly anarcho, sort of crypto spunky outfit that was going to protect you from the NSA. And also it had direct contracts with the Pentagon. And the reason why the Pentagon was funding it, so all these different agencies that are funding Tor have different reasons why they were funding it. The reasons that the Pentagon was funding it was because I think it was being used by the U.S. military actively. And the origins of the Tor project were actually in the U.S. Navy, in the U.S. Naval Laboratory. The U.S. Navy is actually historically linked with surveillance and espionage. Because historically, I don't want to get into the details, but historically the U.S. Navy was actually the driver of surveillance technologies and encryption technologies and interception technologies, basically to intercept signals intelligence that was coming from ships out in the ocean, right? And hiding its own signals intelligence from other countries. And so the U.S. Naval Laboratory developed the Tor project, or the technology that underpinned the Tor project, to hide spies as they used the internet. So the problem with the internet is that it doesn't matter if I'm using the internet, right, or if a CIA agent is using the internet or an FBI agent is using the internet. We're all transparent to the ISPs that provide the service. So if I'm let's say, a CIA agent and I want to infiltrate an animal rights forum or something like that, right? Or I'm an FBI agent and I want to infiltrate an animal rights forum. I don't want the administrator of the forum to see that my IP address, the IP address of the user that I created on that forum, to be linked with Langley, or to be linked with an FBI office somewhere, right? I want to be able to hide that. So for an FBI agent to kind of use the internet, but to hide themselves in plain sight, they have to use Tor, or they have to use something like Tor. And so it was developed.
Isn't that mental? Like, I didn't think it had come down to that. Like, the people that had been like developing this technology, this software, were like somehow inadvertently or directly, like it seems like it was a bit of both, were like funded by the American government anyway through other intelligence agencies and like intel services because they needed a way to, traverse the internet landscape without easily being tracked and like easily being located. So if they wanted to infiltrate some group that they had some type of political interest in, it wasn't easy for that group to understand where the hell they were coming from. So they set up this infrastructure for their own purposes, really. And again, it's been adopted by the broader public and the general public. That doesn't mean it doesn't serve its function. Like what he's saying, like it still has functionality. It's still going to be able to get you stuff. But like, if they're helping create the technology, then they know how to use it. And like, if they are helping create it, they've probably got more of an understanding of its capabilities, and then how to kind of, use it against like individual users and stuff like that. It's pretty crazy stuff. Like, Tor, the dark web, all that sort of stuff really had seemed like it was this crypto anarcho movement, I guess you would say, of like these kind of defectors from civil society that wanted to set up an alternative communication platform for the internet. And so like it really was an alternative. It was really underground. Like underground networks, in the truest sense of the idea of going underground, is something that is detached entirely from the state apparatus. It's not a group of underground tunnels or networks that were constructed by the state and then like other people have then taken them over for their own purposes. Like if you went underground, you were going underground to hide from the state and not be traceable at all, not use their infrastructure. And so like the idea that the dark web or like, Tor and all this sort of stuff subversive is wrong. It's more like, hijacking someone's infrastructure to do your own dirty work. Like, if a government sets up a rail system somewhere, like, and like you build your own train, and like while they're not using it, you quickly, jump on that track and use it for your own means. If I cut out at all, I'm getting a warning from YouTube here. So if I cut out at all, please tell me in the chat or something. I don't know why this is happening. This is bullshit. We're being monitored. Boo the LNP. The LNP found you now, and now they're targeting you with their ads. Should have used a Tor browser. Yeah, the LNP, they'd never find me on there. Bastards. LOL Vietnamese. Oh, sorry. Who is it? Vietnam's firewall is so bad. My wife is Vietnamese. So we go there 1 to 2 times a year. I've been muted again. Trust Google over your government. Yes, I mentioned the US Navy built it. It always been public about Tor. My use case for Tor was in website development. I wanted to test things I built in Tor to ensure compatibility, plus drive some safe traffic through the internet. Safe. Glitched again, and now you're a blueberry-ish color, and your head turned white as the mask. All right, well, thank you. It was split into fourths. Mr. Google isn't happy with the topic. I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't know what's going on here. Okay. Warning. Is lower than the recommended bitrate. Yeah, well, I can't change that now. Wow, you're partially blocked? Fuck. They've got you profiled now, Squeeb. You've been in too many of these streams. They've got you profiled. They know you're up to no good, mate. Careful what you say. You're being watched, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, look, I had no idea. I always believed in the fantasy of the dark web and Tor and stuff like that. But yes, as Andrew has said, yes, I mentioned the US Navy built it. It's always been public about Tor. I didn't realize. I didn't realize. I thought it was a separate form of infrastructure. They got found out because they were hosted on the same IP address. Iran told China, etc., and they all found the assets. Let me ... deal with this situation. All right. You're probably well more qualified than I am to deal with it. Interesting. All right. I will let our friend Yasha continue.
Specifically to hide spies online, American spies online. That was the purpose of the Tor project. And the problem with this kind of technology is that you can also see that if someone uses Tor, because if you actually start tracing the IP information, you see that this user popped out of a Tor node or a Tor cloud. And so in order for this American spies to use Tor, they have to open Tor to as wide an audience as possible, to a wide as not an audience, but as wide a user base as possible. So everyone from criminals to drug dealers to drug users to, let's say, political activists like Julian Assange, to I don't know, soccer moms who are just paranoid about the government, watching them or whatever. Like, you want everyone to use it, and that way the spies can hide them in the crowd. It's like in the old Cold War movies or something. You do the handoff in a crowded train station or whatever. You go to a crowded square to do the handoff where things can't be traced as easily. And so Tor was created to hide spies, and then it was essentially handed off to this strange nonprofit that was essentially run by these nobodies. That people who were involved with helping kind of code peripherally this technology, but there were nobodies. And suddenly it became this. It rebranded itself from a tool to hide spies into a tool that will help hide you from spies. So it did almost like a 180, right? It's in a very interesting story. I don't know if where else we can go from that, or if this is enough, but because I don't want to get too much into the details.
Well, just quickly, because I want to
talk.
talk about what's happening right now in the Trump administration. But you argue in the book that Tor just ultimately doesn't work. I mean,
as a police officer,
Check
I
out
learned
this
the
one.
importance of turning up when it matters.
We were looking at this
As a small
nefarious
business owner,
last
I learned
week
the
as well.
importance of balancing the books and being responsible. And as a minister, I learned that a strong economy and safe community
Look at that
are
face.
central to everything.
See, I don't know why I'm getting hit up with LNP ads for. Like, the algorithm is conscious enough to like really cut and censor our streams, but like it can't figure out that I'm not going to vote for a right-wing party. Like, let's be honest, algorithm. Like, what were you thinking? Like, seriously. Boo Dutton, LNP. Boo. Swing voter. Yeah, apparently it's got me classified. I only get Clive. Yeah, I get those Clive ones. The trumpet for patriots or something like that. God, it's poor. It's really poor. He's so balanced. He flip-flops on policy constantly. Yeah, well, anyway, I've been profiled. So last time I said swing voter, I got a chat mute. Wow. Damn. Wonder what's going on.
I mean, I'd say
it can work.
I'd say it can. Yes, it depends. It works on very low level cases. Yes, like if you're hiding from just local cops or something like that. Like petty crime. Yeah.
Let's talk about what's happening now, because the Silicon Valley is now essentially come to power with the Trump administration. Let's not forget they were all good liberals and Democrats until they weren't. What are they doing? And talk a little bit about...
Yeah, it doesn't want to know my secret. Donation via Super. Invest in Tor. Yeah, they don't want people to know I'm a swing voter, and you've just said it explicitly. Thank you. called it. However, my opinion is that it is a game of numbers. If they target enough young men, there's a chance they may be able to radicalize them. We saw this in America with the Trump movement. So is that what you think they're doing? They're like just spraying the entire Australian scene with all of the kind of the LNP for the Americans that are watching this is our right-wing party. I don't think it's as hardcore as the Republicans. Like, it's not like in bed with like our Christian, evangelical Christians and stuff like that. But like, they're conservative, fiscally conservative. Socially, they're a little bit tolerant, I would say. A little bit more tolerant. But like, yeah, do you reckon that's their tactic, Stephen? It's just like, yeah, just spray every man on YouTube, and like see if it sticks, kind of thing. Centralist right. Yeah, I guess it's a good way of saying it. Dutton's not much of a centralist though. He seems pretty scary. He seems like proper right wing, like, police state right wing. I used to be a cop, and so I know how to control society. Let me unleash myself on Australia. Like, my YouTube often had ads from Turning Point, which is controlled by people like Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk, the old Kirky. People who have discontent with the current system, or we have centralists left. Yeah.
The AI projects, but I think people don't quite understand what's happening before.
I think they're playing with demographics. You just fit perfectly into their demographic based on your gender, age, and where you live. Yeah, I guess so. Goose. That's not happening. I'm not voting for the LNP, so put that in your pipe and smoke it, Peter Dutton.
For our eyes.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting for me to watch this because, when I was writing this book, in essence, all of the tech companies that were active at the time, Facebook, Google, Apple, Twitter, they really did not want to admit that they are part of the American empire, right? That they are completely embedded with the American state and especially with its foreign policy apparatus. They really wanted to maintain that fiction that no, we're just companies and we're operating on a global scale. And all right, yes, there's these contracts, but they really would not answer questions about these things. They would not answer about the relationships or the active contracts they had with the Department of State. I'm speaking specifically.
And Israel, let's not forget.
And Israel, yes. And Israel is like Israel was
they said the I word.
The quiet demon in the corner of the room. But America is an extension. I mean, Israel is an extension of the American empire, so it made sense that these tech companies and Israel are entwined. And in fact, Israel is such a big hub for computer technology that Google and all these different companies would actually buy startups that were created by people who came out of Israeli intelligence and all this stuff. So there was the squeamishness about admitting that Facebook was essentially an extension of American power, that Google was a privatized extension of American power. Things have changed now, quite dramatically, I'd say. I'd say these companies are no longer squeamish about these things. They're out front about it. I mean, they're very much more willing to talk openly about their patriotism, about how much they want America to succeed, and they are American companies, and they're willing to take America's security seriously, and all these things. And I think it's had to do with, first of all, the maturation of these companies. I mean, these are pretty young companies. This whole like sector really became big. I mean, look, it's no more than 20 years old, really. The economic power that these companies have, and the change in American politics, and the collapse of this utopian technological mythology, because I think it started to really turn during the first Trump administration, and even in the run-up to the Trump administration. When I first saw sort of liberals really and the Democratic Party start talking negatively about the internet is when they started pushing this idea that the internet is responsible for Trump's victory, right? For why Trump is so popular. And not just the internet, but the fact that Russia and foreign powers are manipulating the American people into voting for Trump. And so suddenly, you know, it really turned on a dime. Like Hillary Clinton, as the head of Department of State under Obama, spearheaded like her whole main policy as the person in charge of this Department of State was the policy of internet freedom. So she said that no, countries cannot control their domestic internet space. They have to let America in. They have to let American companies in. And if they don't let American companies in, they're totalitarian, they're anti-democratic, they're thugs, they're against freedom, they're against liberty, they're against everything that's holy to, you know, us as democratic people, right? That was her whole thing that she was pushing in that position. And then, of course, when she lost, she began to demonize the internet as this agent of chaos, as a dangerous technology, because suddenly, whether you know it was real or not, she believed that the internet was used to subvert American democracy. I mean, I don't subscribe to that theory, but that's what she believed in. So the internet started to be this agent of danger suddenly.
So he doesn't subscribe to that theory, and like we were literally just talking about that. You know, how, you know, Trump's ascendancy, especially in round number 2, you could really argue was done on the back of some really good PR campaigns through the internet, okay, through social media, and through our largely digital existences now. And like for it not to be a factor in like influencing politics, when like, you know, just go outside and like, you know, just look at people in a public space. If they're like taking public transport or they're sitting around waiting for something, they're glued to their phones. Like, and to like make a large scale assumption that like, you know, the internet and like, you know, social media specifically, that which disseminates information to the masses, like is not influential on like, you know, politics and stuff like that. Like, I think that's a massive call. Now, like what he's saying is like, he doesn't really subscribe to the idea of like Russian interference and stuff like that. And like, you could argue for days over whether or not like Russia is actually interfering with American politics. But like, we already know from things like, you know, Cambridge Analytica, like how they can use like social media and the internet to get people to vote or not vote, like, you know, modify their behavior, like, you know, basically tailor really good attack plans to individuals to influence the democratic process. So like, you know, I'd be interested to hear what like, you know, the chat thinks about whether or not, you know, social media and the internet is influential on like democracy or not. Because like, you know, as Stephen said, like I think he's got a pretty good point. You know, like it was used pretty well, you know, especially with organizations like Turning Point USA and stuff like that. You know, they really fought hard for Trump and to get like, you know, to get him off the ground and get people voting for him and stuff like that. They mobilized the people through like virtually. They mobilized them virtually. They're sending it because they know you're against it and they want to turn you. Yeah, they want to turn me. Yeah, well, they're gonna have to do better than that. They're gonna have to get on and start streaming, and then maybe I'll listen to a few streams of theirs. Then you have to pay for ad block premium. Plug. Yeah, all right, I'll do a plug. That's not a bad idea, actually, Scream. You can be my manager for today. I am going to do a plug, actually. I've got a few people on here that, like, you know, are not regulars. I've got one person we haven't seen before. So if that is you, then please go on over to the Patreon. There's the link for the Patreon right there. Go and become a member for free. You know, I want to get notifications to you, and I can't get that through usual social media platforms because it's all heavily regulated by an algorithm who cuts me out of the circle. Let's be honest. So please go to Patreon and join up for free. If you can financially support, that would be great. We're working towards a fund so I can get YouTube Premium, and then we stop having to look at ads during streams. Wouldn't that be the day? Wouldn't that be the day? You just need to say the I word 2 more times in the stream, and the stream will be censored. is not rail, doesn't hesitate to send cops after anti-war protesters. That's, yeah, they're really cracking down on that at the moment. And like across the world now, apparently, like Germany has started doing it too, like deporting, students that like were protesting for Israel and stuff like that. So it's not just the Americans now. The internet is also our best weapon against the right, as it's easier and quicker to send a video or article than it is to send books and letters. I think that's just the reality of the digital age. Like, we're going to have to come to terms with it as people that are starting a movement and like are getting politically active and stuff like that. Revolutionaries, we will call ourselves. Like, we have to understand that, like, if techno-feudalism is what's coming, if we do live in an age of surveillance capitalism, whether we like it or not, and I think Tor is a great example of this. Okay, like, it is governmental infrastructure that was handed over to, like, the private sector kind of thing to make it look sexy so people could start using it and stuff like that. Like, we have to accept that, yes, okay, the digital world is like completely controlled by private interests and like is monitored completely by the state apparatus and all that sort of stuff. But like, if we want to demonstrate and like, work effectively politically, we're just going to have to like, roll with the punches on this one. And like, we're going to have to just share and use the social element of the internet to our own advantages and get for our own means. And like, yes, we can get censored and we can get blocked, and like there are certain human functions that can still be incorporated into the digital landscape. There's still share buttons, there's still like buttons and interaction and stuff like that. If we build enough of a group and a following here, enough of a movement, like, we should be able to share whatever content we want. Like, like what goes on with Discord, like we share the propaganda over there. And like, if we can share propaganda over there and get like enough people talking about certain issues and then spread that through, we should be able to use this. And like, if some of us get censored along the way, if some of us get shut down along the way, then like, the movement should be able to just reform itself somewhere else, like, kind of thing. But we have to learn, I think Ollie Atlas has got a really point. I think we have to learn to be political, to be digitally political in the information age. Like, we can't rely on like traditional networks anymore. Like, look at us right now, all of us on this stream. Like, we are a pretty motley crew, like, I must say. We're coming from, two ends of the world right now. And like, we've all got different backstories and different visions of things, but we're coalescing around certain issues in this stream at the moment. Who would have thought? Like, who would have thought we'd all be sitting here doing this type of stuff at the moment? But like, this is I think a good example, or exemplifies the potentiality of political organization in a digital era, and especially in one that's a little bit like darker and foreboding, like a techno-feudalist era or something like that. We just need to learn the rules of the game and like how to play smart. I think that's like the good lesson there. Trouble with internet, US tech companies and algorithm is the feed echo chambers. So it doesn't really get messages to new people, just those that already share your thinking. So as a population, it's not a weapon against misinformation. And yes, I think there's a lot to be said about echo chambers and stuff like that. But like, I also find that a lot of people hate watch too. And so like, people will kind of diversify a little bit from their usual mind frame to kind of, watch someone they don't agree with and hate and like, want to get some ammo and stuff. But like, if you can talk in a language that like cuts through that, and like, speaks to people on their own material level, you might be able to get across to them. So there is hope, Squeeb, I would say. Just to say the internet doesn't have an impact is like saying Trump is just a clueless idiot. The more dismissive people are of it, the more they allow it to do more damage. Yeah. And I think that's exemplified in the reaction that he said about like Hillary Clinton. Like, she was just like, the internet's amazing. Like, we should bring it, like we should use the American force to bring, democratic values in the internet to more people. And if they don't, they're totalitarians. And then like, when she lost, she was just like, fuck, the internet's evil. Like, I think it is like sticking your head in the sand to think that the internet has no sway in politics. It's just stupid. It really is. Like, you really not understand how the world works right now. And I'd expect that from someone who's like, in their 80s or their 90s and stuff like that, you know, like they just wouldn't be down with this type of technology, and so they wouldn't understand how it affects the world. But like for everybody else, like, you know, we live in a digital world now. America, just getting people not to vote is enough to change an outcome. So the meddling in the elections can just be ads to say what's more important, vote or spending time with the family. The village idiot used to be the only one in the village. So hard for them to unionize. But in the modern internet, they can group en masse. That's pretty funny. That's a pretty funny analogy. I like that. Yeah, the unionization of village idiots on a planetary scale. That's the internet. There it is right now. So like if someone from like 200 years ago, like we unfroze them right now and they said, hey, what's the internet? We'd be like, well, we go with the squeeb interpretation of the internet, being that now the traditional village idiots are now able to conglomerate en masse across the globe thanks to the internet and spread their own destructive ideas and disseminate that through society. That's basically what the internet is. Thanks for asking. We must let go of apathy and cowardice and educate as we must, if even just from here. Yeah, I think I'm all with that, man. Like consciousness is so important. Have you guys heard of Vanguard? That's more to do with DSA or Harper O'Connor. Some people are trying to bring the motley crew together. Ah, interesting. You like your Harper as well, don't you? 4IS. I don't know if I learned anything here or took any actions though. We are like-minded, convincing each other. We are right. I don't know. There's a bit of discrepancy in these conversations. Is Twitter becoming more right-wing in message? It's hard to battle the storm over there. Yeah, I'd say so. What was Vanguard about 4IS? Yes, enlighten us, 4IS. Yeah, like I think it's pretty... To go back to the original question, I think it is... You'd have to be pretty ignorant or blind to think that the internet really doesn't have an influence on politics, especially after what we've just witnessed, right?
And so American society itself began to view, or American elites really began to view the internet in a negative light. They no longer believed in their own mythology, right? And so I think it started to really turn then. And because the foreign policy establishment, just the elites, began to turn inward much more and to begin to be, the kind of the idea that America would fully control the world in this kind of global neoliberal American utopia began to crumble and collapse, right? And so the mythology started to change, and so the American companies started talking a different way. Now that's a little bit different from part of your question about what these tech guys are doing with Trump and with AI. And I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a complicated question, I guess, because I think I don't know how you would look at it, but my sense of it is that it's a full maturation of this industry, right? It's kind of coming to its own in a way that it hadn't really been before. That it's now taking a kind of a leading role in shaping policies at the highest levels of American power. These companies are not ashamed to be public about their intentions, and that they have so much. So it's a maturation, I think, because they're so intertwined with specifically the Trump administration. They really think that they have the money, and they can influence the government to do things how they want them to be done, to instill policies that they want. So they're not like secondary actors anymore; they're primary actors. And you can see it with the crypto stuff now, where Trump has announced that there's going to be a strategic reserve of Bitcoin and all these other cryptocurrencies. I mean, these are the express demands of the people who, in large part, funded his campaign, and so they are in power now, and so they are kind of bringing their ideology in a much more direct way to.
I think that's a good point. Like, I think it's really emblematic of the change in like the influence of different sections of the bourgeoisie, so the richest, most important sections of the economic ruling class in the free world, so in America, that like you have like Trump like making policy decisions to like, implement reserves of cryptocurrencies. Like, this is giving full legitimacy to a alternative form of currency. Like, that's a massive play for a state, like a state. So the government, the skeleton, I guess, the framework, you would say, of a nation or a society, a cultural group, who issues currency, like that's like one of its main functions, to ensure that the market system works. And like in the case of the US, right, like the entire global financial system deals in US dollars. Like people take it into reserve, they take it into consideration when they're judging and basing their own currency and its standards. And like they're willing to kind of like, he's willing to make policy decisions that would like, okay, accept things as a strategic way of like, diversifying their assets and making sure that like, the American people are protected and from, I guess, financial problems and crises and stuff like that. So you have like different reserves and different currencies and stuff like that. But like really, by effectively, by sanctioning, like openly saying that we're going to, respect a different currency, and currencies like cryptocurrencies that are out of control, like really out of the control of any one government. So it's not just like a foreign government or something like that. These are things that are just, made up by like, rich people and people that have the means of production to produce this type of technology. Because that's what cryptocurrency really is. It's a form of technology. It's not a form of currency in the traditional sense. Not a piece of paper that's backed by a government who just says, yeah, trust us, it'll be worth something. And that's a guarantee, like kind of thing. Or like gold, which has like inherent value because like, many cultures that make up the human race put a lot of value in gold. And so you could really say that like, it can be used as a currency because it has a little bit of its own value kind of thing. But this situation here, accepting cryptocurrency as an alternative form of currency is undermining not only the national currency and debasing the national currency, but it's undermining the idea of the nation. Like really, fundamentally, the government as a nation, like the state, as an apparatus of control and administration, like for society, really has monopoly over like complete monopoly over two things. Everything else can be kind of privatized or turned into new services and all that sort of stuff. Really has monopoly over the use of violence. So they get to create the militaries and they get to create like the police forces and stuff like that. And they get to print currency and they get to control currency. And so like if you're going to start changing your stance on cryptocurrencies and like allowing that to become a real thing, you're literally undermining the government and like the idea of government as it exists in its role for a nation state. Like it really undermines its own existence. And so like, guess who loves cryptocurrencies? All the tech bros, because they're the ones that have access to the technology to be able to make this stuff and proliferate it and like, change public opinion on it. And like, here he is, like the good orange man that he is kind of, bending to the will of the people that made his ascendancy possible. And he's just like, yeah, fuck it. Who cares? We can have the American dollar and we can have like, 250,000 different cryptocurrencies out there. But like, it's really, I think that the one signature of the presidency so far in like just like the first 3 months is like a complete undermining of the traditional roles of government and separation of powers and stuff like that. You gotta pay your backers. That's right. YouTube is censoring me. I'll post it about in Discord. Okay, similar issues I have. It's because you said swing voter, isn't it? Wipes tear away. Yes, I think so. The consequences of my actions are coming back to bite me. Well, that aligns with their dismantling of the current government. Thank you. Thank you. That's, yes, that's where I was going with that, Jag. Yes. That, like, you know, accepting cryptocurrency is just like another extension of just like destroying the government from the inside out kind of thing. And like, hey, let's be honest. That's the libertarian way, isn't it? Fuck the government. Throw so much craziness in us at the wall and see what sticks. Yeah, make it harder for us to fight all the fires. Yeah. And it makes it very difficult as well. Like if there is a change of government, for someone to come in and clean up the mess. Like if you literally trash the entire place, like somebody else might come in and just be like, you know, this isn't a cleanup. This is a knockdown rebuild kind of thing. Let's just wipe the entire system out and start again kind of thing. It really lends itself to that feel or that style of response. So let's see what you got censored in for IS. You rogue. Let's see what I can't see. Where is it? Long listening. What do you get? Vanguard. Log into Vanguard community via email or SSO today. To answer in this stream today, this is Vanguard. It's similar. It's this similar leftist guy to MysterE that has set up his own network. I think it would be good for union organizing and connecting with others. Is this Harper's stuff? Don't know about that guy. But yeah, interesting. Vanguard. And what a choice, hey, for such a loose revolutionary as him. Someone who he thinks that people shouldn't read the Communist Manifesto to create something called Vanguard. Wow. Make government a dumpster fire. So good business case to privatize it. Shock therapy. Lisa Simpson inheriting the Trump presidency mess is too true. Yeah, shock therapy. I guess that's one way to say it. All right, let us let our internet historian finish off, shall we? Let's have a crack.
In large part funded his campaign. And so, I mean, these are the express demands of the people who, in large part, funded his campaign. And so they are in power now. And so they are kind of bringing their ideology in a much more direct way to Washington.
Just in the last 2 minutes, what is it they want? What do they want to create that they don't have?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I mean, I think they have everything they want. I mean, I think
they want the network state. We know the answer. Ask me, Chris.
I'll tell you what they want. They want the crypto guys just want crypto to be fully basically deregulated and to not to just deregulate, to be mainstreamed and to be made an official part of the American state. Almost like a secondary currency or something, and they want access to government contracts. They want to be fully embraced by the American state.
Isn't that crazy though? Like the libertarians, they want government so they can get access to government contracts, because like, you know, government is the wellspring of, like, you know, good sources of income. Like, you know, get a government contract, the government always pays kind of thing. Work with another business, and like you could be waiting for a few months before they pay their invoices and stuff like that. But government always pays. It is backed by the taxpayer. They will always pay. And so like if you can just influence the right policy decisions and get your hands on the right government contracts, you don't have to worry about the profit system. Like the idea of, like, you know, of capitalism, where, like, you know, these capitalistic enterprises emerge where people, like, you know, want to game the market in the best way so they can make the most profit. Like, you know, that is very kind of classic liberal style capitalism, almost pre-industrial revolution style capitalism, might I add, almost. It doesn't really exist, like, for these big corporations. Like, you know, big government contracts is where it's at. Like, the government can print money and they can hand it over to you. Like, you know, look at Elon. Look at Elon. Like, he's so important in terms of his government contracts. That's where he makes a lot of his wealth from. And it's not just like, government contracts with like NASA and stuff like that. Helping them with the space race because he just loves going to space. Like, he's inventing technologies and like, or like, he's producing technologies. I don't know if he's inventing them. That's a bit loose. I retract that statement. He's inventing stuff. Sorry, he is producing stuff that is being used by security agencies. He's got security contracts as well. So like he's got like massive, like billions and billions of dollars of governmental money coming in. These, nefarious libertarian types that are all about freedom, and they're smashing, through Doge and like, with cryptocurrency, they're smashing the evil state and stuff like that. But like in the other hand, they're getting fat, juicy government contracts, like the teat of the government. Yes. Instead of crypto, why not just digitize national currency? Mate, they're getting there, Ollie Atlas. All right. They're getting there. It's just, it's just a matter of time, baby. He steals the tech from people who actually made it. And yeah, he just buys new tech out and buys people out and then just throws the rest of his monetary power at it and then gets all the praise. Which contracts? Prota 6684, contracts with NASA, contracts with security agencies. I don't work for the government, so I can't tell you. I am just relaying what I hear in the media. But like, if you want to fact check that and tell us it's wrong, by all means, please. But like, yes, I've heard it's got to do with space, so NASA programs and defense spending and like national security projects and stuff. It's got a lot of satellites, that man. Hey, a lot of people need satellites. Slowdown in private spending should be balanced with an increase in government spending. Good way to manage yourself out of a depression or recession. Assume big business is just hedging their bets. Yeah, it was a very Keynesian response of you there, might I add. Squeebalicious. All right, so where are we at right now? I get that. Isn't that part of the business he does? He doesn't have any other options apart from NASA. Well, like, yes, I guess. But like, NASA has other options. NASA as a government agency could just, hire its own people instead of contracting out to the private sector, which is traditionally what they have done. Like, why have NASA at all? Just let the private sector do it. But no, they need they need a wedge so they can suck the money out through like a little funnel somewhere. They need like a split in the system so they can suck the money out of it. It's easier to steal ideas than actually make them if you lack any imagination. Yeah, well, it is easier to steal ideas. But like I'll give it to him. He's very imaginative. Like you have to have a lot of foresight to be able to do that sort of stuff. To just go in and be like, that technology is what I need. How much do you want it for? Like kind of thing. And like, there's a lot of ingenuity in that, but like, it's just very predatory. It's vulture capitalism, as some people would describe it. They describe themselves as venture capitalists, which is interesting. Always on an adventure. Peter Thiel and the boys. Contracts can be for parts, consulting, etc. So might not prime the concept, but they can be the hands and feet. What other options does NASA have? For example, who would NASA contract to for rockets other than SpaceX? But like, again, I fundamentally, I think the difference I'm saying is like, why do they need to contract out at all? If they've got the money to give out to people in contracts, then they've got the money to do that stuff in-house. Like, this technology is not something that only belongs to the private sector. This technology, this information, this understanding, this science is something that is available to everyone, government and private sector. And Elon fakes his gaming records to look cool, then rages at people who expose it. He's an interesting character, but he can't be everywhere. Like, he's on Twitter, He's on X. He's playing games. He's running Doge. He's running multi-billion-dollar corporations. He can't have time to do everything. He even started in an animated show to highlight how he isn't really a reptile. I think the problem I have with Elon is how he has survived off these contracts and credits, then turns around and states his Doge BS, throwing all of that under the bus. Yes, yeah, one hand, taking it away, they're destroying it. The other hand, hey, give us another government contract, huh? Hey, they're delicious. I like these things. What do we call them? Government contracts. The exact thing happened to Asmongold after mocking Elon for that. Oh, really? Uh-oh. He's in Elon's sights. Dun, dun, dun. All right, I'm going to let this guy finish because, you know, we like to give people the floor and the opportunity to say stuff. Let's have a go.
I mean, you know, they already have been, but they are much more open about it. I mean, I think they want power and they want a seat at the table, and they are just, they don't want to be regulated. I mean, I think there are different factions in it. You know, I mean, if we're talking about Elon Musk, I think he wants government contracts. He doesn't want to be investigated for potential, you know, Wall Street fraud and all these things. But they just want a seat at the table, like every other major industry, like Wall Street or things.
But
like that.
Elon Musk is talking about the everything app. I mean, they want to cut out banks. They want direct. I don't want to use the word relationships, but they want to directly control everything that you do.
Yeah, they want to be the main monopolists. They want to be the middleman that funnel, you know, your life. That the middleman for your entire life.
Yeah.
I mean, and they are already that. I mean, this is what I mean is like they already have pretty much everything they want. I mean, they're integrated. I mean, if you take Elon Musk, you know, he's a military contractor. He runs like one of the most important propaganda, or like one of the most media platforms, controls it, and, you know, can silence whoever he wants or boost whoever he wants on his media platform. He's part of the surveillance state in a massive way. I mean, he's fully integrated with both the kind of the media ecosystem of the American state, but also the security state apparatus. I mean, runs a privatized NASA. He puts up spy satellites in the air. He provides spy satellite technology to the entire military establishment. So he's already fully integrated. I guess they just want more power, and I think they want control. I mean, like to have a seat at the table, in a way that I think, you know, Wall Street used to have, right? To be the drivers of policy rather than people who kind of lobby at the edges of things, you know. Or
it's really funny to listen to, like, you know, I don't know what this guy is. Like, I'm assuming he's not a Marxist, right? And, like, you know, Chris Hedges, he's across like Marx's work and stuff. But it's really funny to listen to, like, you know, let's just call them for the sake of this conversation, like liberal analysis of like what's going on. And they're just like, you know, they just want power. And, like, you know, they're the section of, like, you know, the rich people, like Wall Street used to be. Now they're the new Wall Street kind of thing. It's just like, you know, we have terminology, like, you know, like as revolutionaries or Marxists or whatever you want to call yourself, like, you know, we have terminology for this stuff. They're part of the bourgeoisie. They've immense, immeasurable wealth from a system built on extreme inequality. And, like, they have control, incredible centralized control of the means of production. They are the fucking bourgeoisie. They are the techno-capitalist bourgeoisie. And, like, they want their share of the power that comes with that. And so they bought themselves a president and backed him up with their social media technology and with their extreme wealth and the power that comes with that. They got him into the hot seat, and now they're looking for that in return on things. Like, this is a story as old as capitalism itself. There's nothing new here. And they should have kind of like, you know, isn't it weird? Like, you know, like it used to be Wall Street, and now it's these guys. And, like, you know, it's just like, just say it what it is. Like, they are the bourgeoisie. They own the means of production, specifically in an age where, like, exchange is so important. We live in an exchange society. You're probably sick of hearing me say it, but I love the idea, so I'm just going to keep saying it anyway. And, like, what did he call them? He said, like, they just want to be the middleman that's kind of there on everything. And so if you're an exchange society, so like everything you do has an exchange component to its relation to everybody else, like kind of thing, and you could be that middleman. You could be that digital technology, that piece of technology, and control that piece of technology that looks after, as a middleman, every point of exchange that happens across the globe. Like, yes, you would completely control society, an exchange society built on like a few people controlling the means of exchange. That's a level of power I don't think even like, anyone like in the bourgeoisie, like in industrial society has ever imagined possible, that level of control, like controlling every exchange that could possibly happen because you've got the technology that mediates it all. That's an incredible form of control. You are just spamming. You are not giving background to your points. Dude, you are making way strong points and not giving any evidence. Give examples. No. You give counter examples. This is my stream. You give me examples and tell me why I'm wrong. If you really want examples, then come to every stream that we do. And like throughout the lifetime of the experience that you will have with us, you will see examples that reinforce this worldview. But like, you come here, you give us examples, and we'll read them. We'll have a look at them for you. Not my job, mate. It's your stream. That's right. My stream, so you provide the examples. Sorry, doesn't work like that. Being the one-stop shop for all needs interactions sounds like the Matrix. It does. But probably a better example would be to call it the company man, to buy from the one company shop